right, we are live. Welcome to the show, everyone. I feel like I stepped back in time to 2016. CNN is resurrecting the absolutely cringe-inducing term, the male gaze, as a bad thing, of course, which I don't think has been in public media since, like, 2016, outside of articles from the Mary Sue or something. Uh, we will also talk about decoupling from China on rare earth. Wow. I'm messing this one up today on rare earth minerals. Sorry, guys. And we are going to talk about Obamacare, the shutdown, and how to make healthcare work for Americans. We are going to talk about all of this and more on episode 515 of the In the Tank podcast.
And now we're out in the streets, out in the streets, out in the streets, yeah, out in the streets. Ain't gonna let no fascists take our democracy.
They can say we're fighting Trump, but where's the fight? What, marching around? Bunch of senior citizens marching around with signs that somebody gave them? Is that the fight? Good luck.
I'm sorry for that. Once again, we let Jim pick these, and he likes to torture the audience very much so. So welcome to the In the Tank podcast, you guys. I am Linnea Lucan, your host. We also have, as always, Jim Lakely, Vice President and Director of Communications at the Heartland Institute. We have Sam Karnick, Senior Fellow at the Heartland Institute, and Chris Talgo, Editorial Director and Socialism Research Fellow at the Heartland Institute. And also we have our wonderful guest, Anne-Marie Schieber, Research Fellow and Managing Editor of Healthcare News at the Heartland Institute. So we are having a staff meeting here on the show today. But thank you so much for taking the time to join us, Anne-Marie.
Oh, my pleasure.
Linnea, let me just ask you, Linnea. I know we call it pulling a Jim when you leave the mute button on and start moving your mouth and speaking, and nobody can hear you. What do we call it now when you're drinking tea at the opening of the show? How long did you think the kicker on that drop was going to be? 4 minutes? It was already pretty long.
I thought it would be funny, but if that,
okay, I loved it. All right, it was purposeful.
What we really need is a counter for when I totally screw up my intro. That's what we need. So how is everybody?
We do one of those signs like, how many days without an accident in this factory? Yeah, so how many shows without a screw up? It'll always say 0 probably between myself, me screwing it all up too.
Absolutely. How's everybody doing this week? Any drama in the real world?
Good. I haven't noticed the government's still shut down, but
yeah, I told Jim in the chat that I actually forgot that the government was still shut down until I was doing research for this show this week. So it's been, probably the biggest nothing of a government shutdown that I have seen. Hello to our audience as usual. Thank you guys for joining us. Everything is going to be great today. This is going to be terrific. All right. So before we get started, though, as always, if you want to support this show, you can go to heartland.org/inthetank and donate there. Please also click the thumbs up to like this video. You can do it right now. Click it. And remember that sharing it also helps to break through some of YouTube's suppression on us, which they might be lightening up on, but so far we have not seen that. So even just leaving a comment helps a lot too with the algorithm. If you're an audio listener, you can help us out by leaving a nice review on whatever program you're using. Okay, guys, let's get into it here. So we're going to take a look at our unhinged topic today. I don't know if we have a drop for that. Lovely. So this one is less, well, it is unhinged, but it's mostly cringe. CNN is once again bemoaning the male gaze. Such a blast from the past. It's really pretty incredible to see this headline at CNN. They say, after years of progress on gender, the male gaze is back. Madeline Holcomb is the writer, and she says, in the past decade, I saw evidence of progress in my media diet. The movies, shows, books, and advertisements I consumed were increasingly giving women a seat at the table. As if that wasn't before, whatever. Heroin chic fell away, and body positivity entered the fashion world. Stories about a woman stealing your man were traded for celebration of the girl's girl who resisted the competition for men's attention. It seemed like women were taking a deeper breath without such heavy cultural restrictions. Then there was a shift. Whatever the catalyst, a change in the political environment seemed to connect with a social change that brought back narrow and at times constrictive ideas of womanhood depicted in media. The rise of weight loss medications coincided with social media influencers sharing ways to get smaller and no longer celebrating bodies of all sizes. Advertisements followed suit, making men's desire once again a dominating factor in how stories are told and how women are portrayed. How had these discarded ideas made their way back into circulation? Didn't we all agree we were through with them? The culprit, I have learned, is the male gaze. It was always there, but now it has stepped back into the spotlight. All right, so later in the article here, she quotes activists who are telling her that traditional beauty standards put forward by the male gaze are unrealistic and usually prioritize whiteness. So that's nice. I just wanted to say at the outset, this article is really long. I mean, it goes on forever. And also, I found the entire thing crazy patronizing. This woman is not upset that women are being forced into a box, because obviously we're not. The latest Disney film that just came out has like a main character Asian girl boss and no romance. And so, you know, this stuff is getting tired actually, but that's another discussion maybe, or maybe Jim can take that in a bit. She's upset that there is a visible alternative to her idea of femininity at all. She is upset that women are choosing and are attracted to and celebrating publicly lifestyles that she doesn't like. Calls to mind something that a feminist activist, Simone de Beauvoir, once said, which was, no woman should be authorized to stay at home and raise her children. Society should be totally different. Women should not have that choice, precisely because if there is such a choice, too many women will make that one. And she was right. And this author is beginning to sense that, and it's making her panic. So, Anne-Marie, as fellow female on the panel here, what was your take on this article?
Oh my goodness. You know, the last place we should be looking for guidance on living the good life is the popular culture. You know, we live in a very secular and confused popular in a world. And this is why we have this pendulum of constantly changing trends. You know, first it was girl power, then it was the trad wife. She's upset about the male gaze, the female gaze. I mean, it's just part of our nature, first of all, to be attracted to the opposite sex. And the problem arises when we objectify the opposite sex. Thank you, mass media, for doing that in the advertising industry. I mean, they're always tempting us with that. And, you know, because they know that's how it gets our attention. I mean, our culture is always trying to convince us that we are in charge. We're in charge of our sex. We can be Wonder Woman, women warriors, maternal fathers, nurture and can nurture and cuddle children in the same way that women can. You know, we need to start looking above, not at the culture to define us and to figure out what is a good and orderly life.
Yeah, I think one of the craziest parts of this, Jim, is that she's implying that, like, now that there is a popular surge of, you know, the trad wife thing on Instagram and stuff, or, you know, popular magazines like Evie that promote, you know, more traditional values and stuff, that the mere existence of these things is proof that, like, we're going back to, I don't know, probably a time that frankly didn't exist quite to the extent that they say that it did, but that women are being put in a box. And now that this stuff is forward in the mainstream culture, in advertising and stuff, you know, the Sydney Sweeney ad is one of the ones that she was particularly upset about. That this is proof that we're what's the word I'm looking for? The pendulum is swinging back too far, and now we're all going to be forced to stay home and never go anywhere again. Like it's crazy. She talks like there isn't still this huge push in media, especially liberal media, to promote the idea that oh, a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle kind of situation, right?
Yeah. Well, radical fourth wave feminism used to be confined to the craziest college campuses. I mean, I went to college between 1988 and 1992, and I went as an English writing major. And my first writing class actually was cross registered with the women's studies department. So I had to read and write essays on radical leftist feminists like Andrea Dworkin, for instance. That's one of the names that just pops into my head. Anne-Marie might remember who that is. People of a certain age might remember. Certainly people in our audience might. But the point of the instructor, who was male, by the way, was to try to teach me how to write like a woman. And I found that odd even at 18 years old. It's like, how does a woman write? I don't know. And how could I ever know? Because I am not a woman and I will never have the female experience because I am a man. And men and women, and especially if you're going to put that in college, you're saying that they're different, right? Because I have to learn how to write like a woman. Wasn't able to do that. But and that kind of crazy radicalized, radical feminist outlook on the world was fine when it was confined to a women's studies department, at my alma mater, University of Pittsburgh, because it wasn't really infecting the real world. We have found in the last 10 or 15 years is that our popular culture and our politics is now driven by radical leftist feminism, intersectional feminism, and all of that. This article is very long and there's so many funny parts. We could probably do the whole hour just picking apart different parts of it. But you read part of the one that stuck out at me, Linnea, and was like, didn't we all agree we were through with this stuff? This stuff meaning normal life and normal pop culture and normal portrayals of heterosexuals of the opposite sex who might show some interest in each other. No, we did not all agree that we're through with that. But Hollywood decided that they were. If you think about it, a lot of this goes all the way back to the Me Too movement, right? Harvey Weinstein, a disgusting human being, rightly called out finally after decades of abusing women in Hollywood and his position in Hollywood for sexual favors. And that Me Too movement suddenly became applied to everything in society, which was an enormous overreaction, to the point that, Linnea, you and I talk about this from time to time privately in chats and other things about how, romance is gone. I mean, if you think about the Star Wars sequel trilogies, I guess it happened at the very end of the last sequel, but there's no romantic spark between Rey and any of her co-stars. We can't have that, because if there's romance, then that diminishes, supposedly, this is not the way I think. This is the way radical leftist feminists who run Hollywood think. If you allow her to have romantic interest in one of her male characters, that diminishes her. No, it doesn't. It makes her human and relatable to the audience. But you can't have even a hint of romance with Rey and any of her co-stars. In this article, just states as fact that the Sydney Sweeney American Eagle ad was controversial. No, it wasn't. It wasn't controversial to normal people. It was controversial if you are a brainwashed radical leftist feminist. Then it's controversial. Like this entire, I don't know, what is it? Probably 10,000 word article on the male gaze and how we thought we were beyond that. Look, without the male gaze and the female gaze for that matter, G-A-Z-E, by the way, without that, the human species dies out. Okay, can we just be okay with that? It's actually fine to show and even celebrate, heterosexual romantic love. When was the last time a good romantic comedy was made? I mean, I know actually, ironically, Sydney Sweeney was in one of the last romantic comedies probably to make money in the last 2 years. Not a lot of people saw it, but again, as somebody who grew up in the 80s and 90s, there were 24 romantic comedies released every year. And some romantic comedies are considered classics going all the way back to the 1950s. And it's because it was an idealized representation of how people would actually like to go through their life. They would like to meet cute, their future husband or future wife. It's a very romantic and aspirational kind of depiction on the screen. But Hollywood is not interested in that anymore. They're interested in pushing ideologies. They're interested in portraying women as only strong and bosses and in control of everything, never depending on anybody else, especially a man, for anything in any movie. It almost never happens. And what you've seen is that Hollywood's box office is spiraling into the sewer. I think I saw a story the other day. The biggest layoffs in Hollywood's history have happened over the last, I think, 1 quarter or 20% of Hollywood writers and producers and people basically what they call below the line, not the stars. Huge layoffs and all of that stuff because they are failing, because they fail and refuse for too long, have refused to give audiences a fair, accurate, and idealistic depiction of human interactions between the sexes in a normal, heteronormative way, using these sorts of terms. I know triggers like the woman who wrote this article, but that's just the way life is. That's what people want, and there's nothing wrong with it. Again, didn't we agree we were all through with this? None of us agreed to that. Only you did, and now your delusions are fading away, and you find that you're all alone. Was that the author on the screen there? Well, no,
I don't know what this is. Yeah. Well, and Chris and Sam, if you guys want to jump in here too, love to hear your thoughts on this one because it is kind of crazy. That's not the author. I've seen pictures of the author.
You know what that looks like to me? It looks like a fat version of Ghislaine Maxwell.
Anyway. This is an economic phenomenon. The rise of DEI and the takeover of Hollywood by particular groups of people that were supposed to represent supposedly unrepresented voices took over. And the movies went into the pits. Nobody could make any money doing this. And the reality has struck back. And interestingly enough, it does come after we had a bit of a slowdown in the economy. The author of that piece makes the point that in the 1920s, women were so free and so psyched up and everything. And then in the 1930s, oh my gosh, it was terrible. Well, what was it? In the 1920s, everybody was free. Everybody was psyched up and everybody was being a bit irresponsible. And then after the stock market crash and the onset of the Great Depression, everybody became much more conservative. That is the way it works. When there's a lot of easy money, people act out. And when you take that away, they have to get practical. Now, the main thing here, though, is that the essential thought that this woman has is really the foundation of modernity, which is the notion that every human being is a tabula rasa, a blank slate, and whatever happens to them in their lives will determine everything that they will do. So her thinking is that, well, there's no such thing as a male or female coming out of the womb. It's just however you treat them, whatever you do with them. So you can take a male and give it all the right treatment and all the right, let's say, propaganda and punishments, and turn that gaze elsewhere. I don't know, maybe again to as Jim alluded to, some other kind of gaze. I don't know, but the point is that we're not tabula rasa. We know that, and it gets proven every time you try to make human beings into something that they aren't. And this is just another hilarious lesson in that, and I'm enjoying it.
Well, I think one of the things that's really amusing, kind of Jim alluded to it earlier, is that a lot of the people that she leans on for this article, I mean, she pulls 5 or 6 university professors to comment on this. And they're all just quoting stuff that we've all heard before 1,000 times. They're mad that there was a Carl's Jr. ad with a woman sharing bare arms or something in it. They're mad at Harrison Butker, of course. which is crazy because one paragraph. So she writes, Kansas City Chiefs player Harrison Butker spoke at a college commencement in 2024 and told the women that they have been told lies about their futures and probably were more excited about being wives and mothers than taking on careers. Okay, and so he frames this like that's not true. One, and then goes on to say, however, those voices are being met with other perspectives, men advocating that sharing the mental load of running a household is part of being in a family, or that protecting and providing includes supporting your wife and caring for the emotional well-being of those you love. Men can be strong, good listeners and be of service to their family. Men who can take care of themselves and aren't just good adults, they might be more attractive to women. Okay, nothing that Harrison Butker said was not that. Like, Harrison Butker and his wife probably have a far more balanced and, like happy home life than somebody who has to make like an actual chore list for their husband and who is mad at him for not emptying the dishwasher or loading the dishwasher the right way or whatever it is. Like, and look, we all have our way to load the dishwasher, but literally me. But she's like created a straw man of him in order to fight him when there's nothing that Harrison Butker said that's remotely controversial, if you're sane. Anyway.
I'm just going to go in a slightly different direction here. So I can't help myself but always view things through a historical prism. And when I think back, the human experience for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years, women were the caretakers, men were the providers. That is deeply ingrained within our DNA. And you cannot just snap your fingers and say, well, in the 1970s, we're just going to say that now everything that's been part of our civilization for thousands of years, we're just going to erase that. And I'm not saying that women and men are not equal, but they're different. They're different for very fundamental reasons. I was lucky enough, my mom was, home, during my childhood. And this whole notion of women should join the workforce and, 2-income households. I mean, I think that is having a profound negative impact on the country. And, there's so many different aspects of this that we can go into. But to me, it's just like, just simple common sense stuff. Men, for better or worse, are supposed to provide for the family. Women, for better or worse, are supposed to make sure that the household and the kids have everything that they need.
Yeah, let me just say something real quick. We can maybe move on, but that division of labor, and you alluded to this, Linnea, that like kind of division of labor between a husband and a wife that she describes, and I think the implication here was that that's not the kind of life that Harrison Butker or anybody who has a trad wife would actually live.
Yeah.
And it's completely that's not the case. I mean, there's the old cliche that, liberals don't understand conservatives at all. But conservatives tend to understand where liberals are coming from because we're just, swimming in their cultural milieu our entire lives in every aspect of our life. But, this leftist, feminist, radical feminist viewpoint of relationships is that a relationship is a competition and that there's a winner and a loser and that the women have been coming out on the losing end for far too long. And haven't we all agreed we're through with that? That is so toxic and incorrect. I mean, the division of labor that was described in that thing absolutely almost perfectly describes my family and home life. My wife and I, there are blue jobs and there are pink jobs. We joke about it, and there are certain things that I do around the house that I don't want her doing, or there's no reason for her to do it. I'm better at it, repairing around the house, things like that. And there are things that she does. I can also do them and do also do them, but we have a cooperative, obviously we're very happily married. We have a cooperative home life. And this whole idea that it takes a radical feminist viewpoint to correct something that isn't even a problem is why there's such a problem here and why there's such a disconnect between articles like this, the viewpoints of the radical left, and the real life that everybody around them actually lives.
I agree with you that there's a leftist, like, cultural part of this. But I also go back to the Obama years when it was the life of Julia, and I vividly remember that the theme of that was you don't have to be dependent upon a man. You can be dependent upon the government. The government will supply you everything you need, your health care, your groceries. I think that's also a big part of this. And Sam, you and I have been talking about 1971 and, getting rid of the gold standard here. And when you look at the two income, trap, it really did start around that time because, so many women did have to enter the workforce. And what did that do? That I'm not saying that that's a bad thing at all. But when you're forced to do that just to make sure that you can, sustain your family, I feel like that is, something that many women probably don't necessarily want to do, but feel that they're forced to do. And when I was teaching, I remember so many of the teachers, they would take maternity leave and they would come back and just be like, I don't want to be back here. I want to be back at home with my kids. And that really, always like hit me hard. Well, then why don't you? And I understand though that some of them didn't have that choice. So I think there are societal pressures at play here, but I also do think that this is part of the everything's relative, and there are no black and white distinctions between anything. Men and women are different. You cannot overcome that. Okay.
Yeah. And who pushed this idea that women are inferior? It was the feminists back in the 70s, giving the idea that if a woman cannot be a man, she's less than a man, and never, ever accounting for feminine strength, what that actually means, which means in many ways, women are stronger than men, not necessarily physical strength, but in so many other ways. I mean, this goes back to ancient days in the Bible. I mean, it's just part of our nature. They just don't understand it. They don't get it.
Chris made an important point, and I just want to jump in with a little quick comment, which is that the need for two incomes in order to buy a house pushes women into this situation. So when you say, a woman doesn't want to be lorded over by a man or bossed by a man, I can understand that. That makes sense. I don't think I've ever seen it in a real couple, but okay, let's say that that's the case. But then they go into the workforce and they're bossed over and lorded over by people that have no relationship with them whatsoever, that don't have to, live in the same house as they. Isn't it more fulfilling? I think it's clear that even many men would find it more fulfilling to spend more time with their family, instead of being, sort of, I hate to use a word like this, but sort of enslaved to a multinational corporation and live in a cubicle. I don't see how that's much of an improvement. So we always need to look at what's the alternative that you're measuring against. If you're measuring against, being rich, super rich, and living in a boat on off Europe somewhere, that's one thing. But if you're talking about in practical terms, working around the house and raising your children and being around them all the time and being around other neighbors and so forth and things like that, as opposed to living in a cubicle and punching buttons on a computer all day, let's be fair. Let's see what people really want and then let them have it.
Just lastly, I just want to say one thing. The job of a mother to provide a loving, and safe household, there's nothing more important than that. So I don't care if you go and earn $10 million. If you're not doing that, then nothing else matters. And there have been so many studies, and some of these are anecdotal, but women who in their early 40s say, oh, geez, I really regret not having a family and being so career oriented. Because, unlike men, women only have a time frame there that they can have a family.
Yep. Well, we could honestly, like Jim said, or like everyone's been saying, we could probably do an entire episode just on the social breakdown, and maybe we should. That might be interesting. Maybe if the audience is interested in an episode like that, we can do that. But I do want to move along to a little bit of policy stuff. Starting here with a piece from the Epoch Times about decoupling from China. U.S. may decouple from China if rare earths dispute persists. Remarking on the ongoing U.S.-China dispute over rare earth exports, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said during a October 15th press conference that if Beijing refuses to act as a reliable trading partner, the United States and its allies may have no choice but to decouple. While it's not in Washington's desired outcome, he said that it could become unavoidable given China's posture in the current standoff over rare earth supplies. In April, Beijing expanded its export control list to include 7 rare earths and magnets made from 3 of them, rattling global supply chains in defense, electronics, and automotive industries. And then in July, Washington and Beijing reached a framework to facilitate shipments, pausing the heavy tariffs for 90 days. Yet, disruptions persisted, and on October 9th, China added 5 new rare earth elements and dozens of processing technologies to its restricted list. Trump accused Beijing of sinister and hostile actions and threatened a new 100% tariff on Chinese goods. Bessent said that for 20 years, any time that a business in a market-based economy launched or refined a process, China would swoop in and undercut the pricing in order to put that company out of business. So, Sam, this is bad stuff, honestly. And I've said it before, but it's sort of maddening that we even got to this place. Bessent said that everyone was asleep at the switch in the 90s on the China issue, and it's been building since then. So how on earth is this free trade, one, internationally with China, and 2, what are we going to do about it, and what can we do about it, really?
Right. It's certainly not free trade, and it, in fact, destroys free trade. What you have here is a situation where the United States consciously decided to couple with China and to allow the deterioration and ultimately destruction of our own mining of these minerals and the like. And so what happens when you, and I think one big reason for that was environmentalism, that we thought, well, we want these beautiful valleys and hills of that don't even have any trees on them. We want it, but they look orange because there are beautiful minerals there. So we want these areas to be untouched, and there are ways of touching these areas and getting the materials out and the minerals out without damaging them permanently. So I think that what happened was there was a combination of things, but in particular, environmentalism in the United States was, I believe, a big part of what happened there. So when you remove all those industries, then of course you're going to have to depend on someone else. That was obviously short-sighted, and this is the problem. It's the short-sighted nature of government and the short-sighted nature of big businesses. They will operate on the basis of what looks good today. So we need to operate on the basis of what is good for us in the long term. It's clear that returning to wise and well-considered mining and other extraction activities is the right thing to do. We're not going to be able to do without that. Now, how do you get from today, where everything is coming from China, to tomorrow, where it's not, and you're doing it in-house? Well, the way you get there is you start today, and you have to start mining. You have to unleash these industries. Until we do that, we're simply going to be going in the wrong direction continually.
In response to the question that I see on the left, is the United States decoupling from China? The answer to that is no, of course not. We're not going to ever decouple completely, although I think a decent argument can be made in favor of that. But I think what this really boils down to is our dependence on China for these rare earth elements and rare earth minerals, especially in relation to these electric vehicles, windmills, solar panels, and all the components that are needed to build those. So if we were to say that we are no longer going to engage in stupid policies that put windmills and solar panels all over this country and mandate people to drive EVs when they actually don't want to because they're not feasible, this would not be a problem. So I think that really what this is about is obviously China and the United States are in some pretty tough negotiations in terms of this big trade deal. And I think China's probably coming from a position of weakness here and trying to say, look, we can cut you off from this. But I always go back to this. China depends a lot more on us than we depend on them. China's not doing very well. China is struggling mightily. They no longer Chinese exports to the United States are down 50%. Since the quote unquote trade war began. And what they have been doing is they've been dumping their product to Europe. And even Europe is now starting to say, no, we are not going to be taking these anymore because it's starting to have deleterious effects on the European economy. So I think that China is actually coming from a position of total weakness on this. And it really seems like it's pretty desperate that they would even go down this road, because once again, we, as Donald Trump loves to say, we have the cards in this relationship. And I don't think this is going to play out well for them.
Well, I hope you're right, Chris, because it does seem like kind of insane that one country and a country that's our enemy geopolitically can just turn the spigot off on essential materials like
Sam said, we've done that to ourselves.
Yeah.
We have done this to ourselves, and it's going to take years. It's going to take a lot of patience. One of the things that I've been thinking a lot about recently is how just how instant gratification people are, even with these problems that have been in place for decades, and they're going to take years to actually turn the corner on. So when people say Trump's been in the Oval Office for 9 months now, and the economy is not great. Well, because the economy was going on a downhill slide for, I could make the argument, probably almost 60 years. And it's not going to just turn around in 60 days. It's going to take probably a long time. And it's probably going to take a lot of pain and suffering if we really want to, get things back to the way that they need to be. But it's the old thing of delayed gratification. Sometimes you just have to be patient. Sometimes you just have to say, it's going to be a little bit tough, but this is the right thing to do. And over the long term, it's going to be beneficial to the American people. And that's just my go-to standard of almost everything. That's the lens that I see all these things through. We're not here to make China, a great country. We're here to make America a great country.
Anne-Marie, I see you look like you have something to say about it. Your mic is muted at the moment.
Hang on, there we go. Because I remember the 90s and when we made China the world partner in the World Trade Organization, I think it was 1998 or something. Everybody was so excited that this was going to change the world, that it was going to lead to peace. We were no longer going to have an adversary based on this idea that trade is a way for countries to remain at peace. But my goodness, our history is replete with examples where that has broken down. Trade is leverage, and China knows that. Can the U.S. trust a trading partner that's a one-party state? Because there is no competition of parties, nobody pushing back. I listened to a real interesting talk a couple of years ago at Hillsdale College. It was given by a guy named Brian Kennedy of the American Strategy Group. And the talk, you could probably find it online. It was back in 2023. It was called Big Pharma and the Chinese Communist Party. And it was based on this idea, is China is going to control all our drugs? Are we going to get access to those drugs and so forth? But in his talk, it was amazing. He said, China is not interested in ideology or even people for that matter, but their basic interest is control over natural resources because they think they're very limited. And they would do it at the expense of eliminating everybody in the world to get it. China was the country that had a one-child policy for many decades. And it was under this belief that there were limited resources and we had to control the population because there is a limit to them. So, I don't know how we're going to resolve this. I am encouraged that President Trump is finally giving attention to this idea that we need to be more independent, not just on natural resources like rare earths, but drug ingredients, which he's making some headways and encouraging big pharma companies to start manufacturing products in the U.S. We have to really take a look at our regulatory structure because there are a lot of reasons why big companies go abroad to manufacture things. They save money, less regulation. So these are all things that we just have to start thinking about.
Absolutely. And I don't want to spend too much time on this. I mean, China has control over most rare elements for now. But there are two that they haven't got, and that is gold and silver. So here's our ad read transition here, Andy. If you can pull up the ad, you can have your own precious metals, you guys. I think that my transition there was pretty good, but now I'm blowing it, of course. A lot of people that you will watch in the conservative, libertarian, or even just plain old prepper spaces will hit you with ads for buying precious metals, you guys. They're not wrong that these are a good investment, but you want to be careful about who you buy your metals from. At In the Tank and also the Climate Realism Show, we trust Advisor Metals over all of those other guys. And that's because we know that the person running the place is absolutely the best of the best. A great friend of Liberty, Ira Bersatsky, owns and is the managing member of Advisor Metals. He has decades of experience in precious metals and is the only person in the physical precious metals industry who has the Commodities Futures Trading Commission federal registration. What does all that mean? Well, it means that everything Ira or a member of his team says to you has to be factual. So there's no sketchy sales pitch or bait and switch. Ira is held to the highest ethical standards, and there is full transparency, which is way too lacking in too many places these days. If you want to diversify your investment portfolio and your savings, if you're planning for retirement and are concerned about economic uncertainty, if you want a tangible asset that is easy to buy and sell, you can secure your assets with a wide range of physical precious metals by getting in touch with our friend Ira at Advisor Metals. Ira is going to make it easy for you. All right, so please, you can visit climaterealismshow.com/metals, and you can leave your information for Ira and get started with investing in precious metals and expand your current portfolio. You can go to climaterealismshow.com/metals. And when you talk to Ira, make sure that you let him know that we sent you. That helps us. You're helping your financial future. Everybody is happy. So please diversify your portfolio with precious metals from Advisor Metals. All right. Thank you, guys.
Great job, Linnea.
Thank you. I fumbled it again. I don't know what it is today, but I was pretty excited about that transition there. Anyway, so I do want to jump to our main topic today because we have an expert in the house. Anne-Marie is a healthcare expert. So I wanted to talk about Obamacare. Starting with some commentary that's in the Federalist, a lot of people seem to be kind of misinformed on the issue of the Obamacare subsidies that are expiring at the end of this year. And weirdly enough, they're misinformed by both, Democrat-run mainstream media and also Marjorie Taylor Greene for some reason. Democrats are in part holding the government hostage, trying to get some of these wish list items funded. And so here's an answer that I found was very straightforward, published by Chris Jacobs over at the Federalist. The title is "Contrary to Marjorie Taylor Greene's claim, most of the Obamacare subsidies are not expiring, for good or for ill." First things first, contrary to Greene's claim, most of the Obamacare subsidies are not expiring. Only the enhanced subsidies passed by the Biden administration in 2021 and extended in 2022 will lapse effective December 31st. The Biden administration sold those subsidies as temporary responses to the COVID pandemic, and Democrats want to make them permanent. Greene and others are conflating premiums with out-of-pocket costs. The former are not doubling, and the latter are rising only because of the expiration of the enhanced subsidies. So doing the math here shows that under this scenario, premiums would rise from $74 per month to just under $159 per month next year. But if you think that a full premium, he writes, for health insurance comes to only $159 per month, I've got some land I want to sell you. So that's the short fact check. And anyway, this is basically a tactic that the Democrats are using right now to try and scare Republicans into continuing to increase support and funding of Obamacare, which the last time I checked, nobody likes. Even if Democrats won't admit it, nobody seems particularly happy with the way that this is going. In fact, this post at Forbes explains that this problem we're in right now with expensive insurance premiums is because of Obamacare. Rising premiums were not some unexpected consequence of Obamacare. They were baked into the law's very structure. Because of Obamacare's long list of federal insurance market regulations, insurers had no choice but to raise premium or prices to cover their costs. And that, the problems that were baked into it include things like community rating, which bans insurers from charging older, sicker patients more than a certain amount that then they charge younger, healthier people. There's also a requirement which mandates that all plans cover the same list of service and procedures, regardless of what a patient actually needs or wants. Guaranteed issue the requirement that all insurers sell to all comers, regardless of status or age. And economists have said it from the beginning that Obamacare is a disaster. So, Anne-Marie, how did we get here? I mean, why does it seem like Republicans aren't even interested in getting rid of Obamacare anymore?
Well, I mean, this is something we all knew. People are fed up with covering up the bleeding. The plans have been in effect theoretically for about 11 years. They were passed in 2010. They are everything the naysayers said about them and worse. I mean, look at the medical oligarchy that Obamacare has created. We've got big insurance, big medicine, big hospitals. I mean, we are constantly having to feed this beast. And you don't even have to be a policy expert to see what is going on. You know, you just drive down to any big city center and you see the biggest building usually in town is the hospital. And then you see a bunch of sick, lost souls, homeless, mentally ill, who are untreated, walking the streets, physical ailments being untreated. Our outcomes are not improving. They're getting worse. And, you know, the building, the hospital building never stops. Where is this money coming from? It's not improving. And, you know, this is what's going on. So, you know, half the people in Obamacare are in fully subsidized plans. And this has led to a huge amount of fraud. The Paragon Institute has done a lot of work on this area. And there was one thing they came up with. They looked at every state of who was getting Obamacare plans, who was enrolled in Obamacare plans. And they discovered the demographics in Florida for the ones who are most needy like the people enrolled in Obamacare and subsidized plans far exceeded people in the demographic in the state of Florida, for example. So what happened was, because there was no out-of-pocket costs, people could be enrolled in these plans and not even know it. There are reports of people being doubly enrolled, and that money is going directly into the pockets of insurance companies. So, you know, we've got a lot of fraud. I think the one idea that I've heard, and I've never really seen Republicans as unified on this as I do today. Back in 2017, when they tried to repeal and replace Obamacare, it fell apart. But this time, I think they're standing firm. And, you know, Trump is kind of hard to read on this. And we got the midterms coming up, but I don't see people protesting, screaming about, you know, our healthcare going up. The premiums will definitely go up. And we'll finally expose Obamacare for what it is. What Congress can do is, I think probably the most immediate solution is to make what we call short-term plans. They are the most unregulated. They're not regulated by Obamacare. And they're as close as to traditional indemnity insurance that we had before Obamacare went into place. When Trump came in 2017, he expanded these plans. They were always in the law, but Trump allowed them you could get one of these plans for up to a year and renew them for 3 years. So what that meant is, if you got sick towards the end of your term, you could get renewed without being underwritten. So you had coverage protection for 3 years. And then the Biden administration came in and undid all that. And the maximum you could get those plans is for 4 months. Nobody wants to buy a plan that's going to cover them for 4 months, because the possibility of getting sick would be very high, you know, without coverage. So Trump's put those regulations on hold, and Congress needs to codify it. They need to, because it keeps going back and forth to these administrations. And I think once people could see how well these plans would work, there would be more political people feel more emboldened to go to create, you know, much more free market policies and ways that we can insure people for healthcare. Expanding HSAs, doing things with HRAs, which are health reimbursement accounts for employers, giving people the option of portable plans. I mean, I could go on and on about this, but we're in week 3 and nobody seems to be moving on it. And I think that's an encouraging sign.
Yeah. Well, and I wanted to point out too, there's another article that Jacobs wrote for the Federalist where he's looking at, like a couple simple ways that you could fix some of this rather than just expanding Obamacare forever. And you mentioned a couple of these already. So he said Washington should look at making health insurance portable, so it follows people from job to job. And that would be using those health reimbursement arrangements, or HRAs. So the worker in that case would own that policy, and they can select that coverage that they want out of it and take it with them to their new job, or if they, move along from there. So, and then second, he also recommended allowing health savings account dollars to be able to pay for health insurance premiums, which seems fairly, it seems like that would be very straightforward. So why don't Republicans move on this stuff? We've been talking about it as long as I can remember anyway.
It's definitely not as easy as you make it, though. That's the problem. The healthcare market is so far from a free market, it's not even funny. This goes back to World War II when FDR implemented wage controls on businesses. So what did they do? They said, well, in order for us to attract good talent, we'll offer them benefits such as healthcare. And ever since then, we've just had this, this relationship between your job and your healthcare. It's totally messed up. Fast forward to 1960s when we got Medicare and Medicaid. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that I just read a biography of Lyndon Johnson, and it's just so funny when you look back and you say that they thought that the amount of money that would be necessary to fund those programs would never even come close to what it is now. And it's expanded over the years. Obamacare obviously made things much, much worse. I totally do not agree that we should be throwing a pity party for insurance companies, because I vividly remember during the Obamacare process that the insurance companies were completely on board, because it basically mandated that you had to buy a product. And if you go back to the Supreme Court decision, that I think is, just something that I'll never get over. How can you be forced to buy a product? How can that be forced upon you? Obviously, the Supreme Court twisted themselves into a pretzel in order to, uphold Obamacare. But these things are just so, fundamentally against free market principles. So HSAs, that'll help, indemnity plans, short-term limited duration plans, all that stuff definitely helps. But I really wish that we could get to the core of the problem, the root cause. The root cause is that the government has become so involved in healthcare, whether it's con laws, whether it's you have to have this, these many things on your insurance, whether even if you're a man, you have to have, like female-based like healthcare services. Is just insane. So, it's going to be a really tough track ahead here. Marjorie Taylor Greene, the reason why she's saying what she's saying is because her family members are on Obamacare and they are receiving these premium spikes. So I can understand why she is a little bit annoyed that this is happening like this. I don't think that you should just cut them off, immediately. I do think that you need to compromise here a little bit. I think that you can't just just slice all the subsidies, immediately, because you're going to put a lot of people in a really dangerous position that are not there because of their own volition. So I think that this needs a bipartisan approach. I don't know if that's ever going to happen, given the current state of Washington, D.C. and Capitol Hill, but we need Democrats and Republicans to come together and pass a bipartisan bill that actually addresses the root causes. And Anne Marie's, mentioned a lot of them, and there's many more. That is what we need.
See, what happens if the premiums go up? Healthy people and young people are not going to buy the plans, and the market's going to fall apart because the insurance companies are going to be stuck with the sickest of the sick, and they can't function that way. Imagine if we bought health insurance like we buy maybe term life insurance, where you buy it very early on in your life. You buy it for a term period, maybe 20, 30 years. You agree that you're going to pay a premium for that extended time, and you hold on to it, because if you don't pay that, you will be underwritten again. And if you get sick, you're stuck, right? You won't be able to buy life insurance. Imagine if we did health insurance that way. That would incentivize every young, healthy person to get into the market. And then we probably have to figure out, because the market is so screwed up now and we have people who are dependent on government health care, we would probably have to come up with a backup system for the significantly disabled population who have huge healthcare costs. And we were doing that in 2010. Before that, states were running like in my state of Michigan, we had a program of healthcare insurance of last resort where people could apply for this. And, it covered their, there's only a small percentage of the population that really needs that kind of coverage. It can be done.
But Anne-Marie, when we talk about health insurance, we're not even talking about insurance in the classic definition of the term, because, when I use my auto insurance, it's if something very, very bad happens. If I get into an accident, they've got to, redo a quarter panel or something like that. I don't use my auto insurance when I go, get my oil changed. I don't use it when I go to the gas station, but that's what healthcare has become. Another thing, and Anne-Marie, I know you know much, probably more about this than I do, but part of the problem is that you're saying that everyone, no matter their physical characteristics, are going to pay the same rate. Well, what if someone's unhealthy? What if they're obese? What if they smoke? What if they've got diabetes? What if they have not taken care of themselves their entire life? And that means that they're going to be taking a lot more out of the system than someone who is young, healthy, and takes care of themselves. The fact that you cannot have different rates for different, people based on that is another huge thing, because there is no actual actuarial data being used here. It's just,
so there's no underwriting. Anybody can jump on the plan. And we knew that going off. They were like, what would stop somebody from not wanting to pay a premium and jumping on to Obamacare when they get sick, which is what goes on. And it cannot function that way. Right. We don't have health insurance. We have health plans. These are payment plans. They don't do what insurance is supposed to do, which is to protect you in a rare but expensive event.
I'll go to my grave saying that I think Obamacare was not meant to fix the healthcare system. It was meant to bring in single payer, because look at what it did with Medicaid expansion. Look at it, it gummed up the system so much. And I remember really smart people saying that at the time, that, hey, this is a really tricky ploy by Barack Obama and company to try to make it seem like they're putting in this good, solid system when they know it's going to fail. And look at it where it is. 15 years later, it is completely failing. Barack Obama repeatedly promised on the campaign trail in 2008 that if you pass Obamacare, your premiums will go down. The premiums have gone, they have skyrocketed.
John Goodman, the co-publisher of Healthcare News, always famously says, Obamacare is nothing more than Medicaid with higher premiums and copays. It's managed care is basically what it is.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, Obama, I was pulling up some commentary on this earlier, and Obama had promised specifically that the cost of your health insurance for the average American household would go down thousands of dollars with Obamacare. And that's obviously the exact opposite of what's happened.
Even PolitiFact called that the lie of the year. Do you know how hard it was for them to actually go forward with that and to say Obama was the liar of the year?
Well, and you've got people like John Fetterman, too, who's talking about how bad Obamacare has been and how the subsidies, the Democrats are kind of cynically using this at the moment to keep the government shut down. It's crazy how everybody agrees that it's terrible, but we can't get anything done on it.
Our healthcare system is going to implode with Medicare, Medicaid, and Obamacare. There are not enough young people to sustain the baby boomer generation that are going to be taking up a huge cost burden of healthcare services in the decades to come. So I don't see the end game here. These subsidies, they don't even come close. They don't even try to address the root causes. It's just paying, it's just trying to mask the cost. It is not a solution. It is just kicking the can down the road, which Washington, D.C. just does on almost every single issue.
Yeah, in the show notes, I've actually put them. If you in this video, if you go to the description, you'll see our show notes, and there's links to all the stories that we talked about today. One of them is from the great Sally Pipes, who is one of the best healthcare analysts in the country. Has a piece in Forbes, and her lead there says Democrats are panicking about a looming 75% average increase in out-of-pocket costs of insurance premiums next year for the roughly 6% of the population that shops for coverage on Obamacare exchanges. I don't shop for coverage on the Obamacare exchanges. And apparently only 6% of the population does. So we completely blew up the coverage that everybody liked for 6% of the population. And it was passed by lies. And again, I have a long memory about this. It was basically shoved down our throats by hook and by crook. Was it Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve? Literally in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
To just get it through.
Reconciliation bill too.
Yeah, that's right, through reconciliation, so it didn't need so it couldn't be filibustered.
Yeah.
Pipes also mentions that individual market premiums over the last decade have been surging. Between 2023 and 2014, when Obamacare's regulations took effect, they rose 47%, and average premiums for benchmark plans rose 75% between 2014 and 2024. I know that my insurance is a lot more expensive. I know that the Heartland Institute has to renew a plan every year. Every year it gets much more expensive. I know that my deductibles are now higher. I know that my out-of-pocket costs are now higher. And I know that my services are reduced. Everybody listening to or watching this podcast, I am sure, has had the exact same experience. Everything is more expensive. The healthcare is not as good as it was before. This entire thing was passed by lies by Obama and everybody else. And whether it's to get us a single payer or not, I don't know if we're going to get there. But there are no market incentives right now at all. There were a few before, but there are no market incentives to reduce prices. There are no price signals for providers or for consumers. And so this is what you get. This is actually the worst of all worlds. And I have a question for Anne-Marie Schieber, because I know she's the best expert out there on healthcare, especially on this podcast. I also have a very bad memory of John McCain putting his thumb down with a freaking smile on his face when it was his vote would have helped us overturn Obamacare. So my question to Anne-Marie Schieber is, what would have happened if we had killed Obamacare, except for John McCain? Thank you, with a freaking smile on your face. What would have happened if we had repealed Obamacare then? And what would happen if we repealed Obamacare now?
Well, then we had COVID, which turned everything upside down. So I don't know what might have happened. We could have had something even more disastrous, because the enhanced subsidies that we're talking about right now were passed under the pandemic. So this is how people who have a household income up to $600,000 can get free premium Obamacare plans. So that's what we're talking about, by the way, extending that extra coverage. But, you think about it, going back in 2010, when this thing was passed, every Republican voted against it, and 39 Democrats in the House, and all but one Republican in the Senate voted against it. And look what happened the year later in 2010. All those people were kicked out. So, everyone's talking about the midterms and how politically we can't do this. They have short memories, because I'll tell you, we are not where we were back then. There was a lot of fear about healthcare, and there were so many other problems that probably could have fixed what we had thought were problems back then. But we decided to throw it all out and create a brand new program that just wouldn't work. It was completely managed care.
The Tea Party movement actually was born out of the Obamacare debate. And look at how far we've fallen from that. I mean, as someone who does care about the national debt and our deficits, it's almost like it's quaint when you look back to the deficits of, the Bush years and the Obama years to where we are now with, $1 trillion, $2 trillion deficits. And that is just going to go through the roof as Medicare, Medicaid, and Obamacare just eat up more and more spending.
I can tell you what the end game is, and the end game is not single payer. Single payer can't happen. It's just not doable. The numbers are ridiculous. I mean, we're arguing over these silly extended subsidies for people who are fairly wealthy.
But Sam, what if they do single payer and then they just ration care like they do in countries like Canada and across Europe?
I don't think politically you can get there. Because
I hope not.
The conditions that we're living in today are different from the conditions that even at the time of Obamacare, when they had the dream that they could turn everything into single payer. What's going to happen is one of two things. Either it's going to be fixed slowly by tinkering with it and slowly drawing down how much you spend as a percent of GDP, of the total economy, slowly drawing down that percentage so that people feel like, well, it's helping those who really, really, really need it. Either that, and that is the Trump and Republicans' approach right now. And Trump has done that in a variety of other areas as well. So I think it's clear that that's what they desire.
That's what Medicaid was designed for.
Well, you know, there you go. And they expanded Medicaid.
Yeah.
So they expanded Medicaid, and so that got it on one end, and then on the other end, expanding into the individual marketplace was Obamacare. So what you have there, though, is you can do that, and I think you can use a lot of reforms, the ones that we've talked about and so forth, and basically try to get yourself toward a system that is universal health service accounts or health savings accounts. So get toward a system that does that, and then those health savings accounts pay for catastrophic insurance, and you work your way through from there. What's more likely to happen if the Republicans break on this, and Ann has alluded to the fact that they've stood strong so far, and one wonders if perhaps they actually perceive the reality. Because what will happen if they do break is there will be a collapse. The system is not fiscally supportable. It won't work. It will create even faster inflation than the inflation that the Biden administration unleashed through the Inflation Reduction Act and its other measures that were supposedly meant to straighten things out after COVID. So what's going to happen is you're either going to have a way of saving the system by making it more responsible. That's what Republicans do, and they've been doing it for decades, saving the welfare state, saving all these big money propositions that the government does. So you're either going to get that or you're going to get a collapse. Single payer isn't an option because the collapse will happen well before you could get to single payer.
Couldn't it be, though, Sam, that they'll put in single payer after the collapse? Like they'll use the collapse, chaos to say, look, here's a way that we can do this to make sure everyone has coverage right now.
That is a great question, and the answer is no. They won't be able to do it because after the collapse, the world would be entirely different. Things would look so different from the way they are today that no solutions, no answers that we're looking at today would have any applicability to it at all. Things would be so weird, so strange. And think about them. One thing people don't think about is the massive deflation you would get, the massive drops in prices that you would get, and the massive drops in wages and the massive drops in the stock market. All these things would crash. So when that happens, you are kind of starting over in a lot of ways. So but when you're starting over, you're really starting over. You're not starting over in like 2011. You're starting over in, I don't know, maybe 1620 or something.
Yeah, John Z says road warrior time.
Not quite that bad, but close.
Sam, I got to say, I'm not as optimistic on that one because I think the consolidation in the healthcare industry is almost paving the way for a single payer system. I remember when I was a kid and we had our little doctor practice, and you would call the office, and you would just get the assistant, and you would make an appointment. Nowadays, everything is so centralized. You have to go through a giant hospital system. Like here in Illinois, it's like we go through Endeavor. I tried to make an appointment to do some varicose veins and work on my leg. It was 18 months out. So there's a huge problem. The doctor shortage problem we've also got. Also, as these older people who are very sick are taking extended, care, I mean, that's going to cost so much money. So I don't see the solution here.
Chris, you're making a great comparison, and that is what you're identifying, and what this whole discussion has been about is the intensive complication and complex and greater complexity of the system as government continues to intrude and make more rules. And each thing that the government does is meant to correct something that went wrong because of something that the government did, and so on and so forth. And that's how these systems work. They get more and more complex until they're not supportable anymore. And that's why the collapse comes. So I think it is very interesting that we all talk about, well, how can we save the system? It's true that you can save the system. As I said, the way the Trump and the Republicans are trying to do it would save the system. I'm not sure that that's exactly best for us in the long term, But I do think that if you save the system and let it just draw down in size and shrink away over time, it'll be a lot better. It'll be a lot more normal than a collapse.
I think
but
federalism. I think federalism is the answer to this. If you just let each state, if California wants to provide a single payer, coverage for all, so be it. But then you've got to pay for that. I would love
you
it
won't
if
get it without a collapse. You won't get it.
I know, but I would just love it if some of the red states said, you know what, we're going to go in the total opposite direction. We're going to have, healthy, robust DPC agreements. We're going to have HSAs. We're going to open the floodgates. You know what would happen? And it's already happening for other reasons. People from the blue states would go move there because they're saying this is better. It's just that but Obamacare is a big federal law that has just, globbed up the entire healthcare industry. So it's difficult because these federal programs, Medicare, Medicaid, those are federal. In the states, some obviously are using the federal, dollars, in a very short-sighted manner, but this is so unsustainable. I mean, Illinois, we are in such a bad place right now in terms of, our debt that we owe for the unions and their insane healthcare benefits, all this stuff. It's totally, it's going to collapse.
We have recommended to every state in the country that they consider filing for the biggest Medicaid waivers they can.
Yeah,
which is, it's obviously not Obamacare, although there are intersections there. But to go for Medicaid waivers and just get out of the system as much as you can and sort of turn it into block grants for your state, then you can experiment. These things are all possible, but will they happen? I don't know.
Heavy lift for sure.
Yeah.
But Sam, Hakeem Jeffries says that Obamacare would work great if Republicans didn't ruin everything somehow.
Yes, he's probably right that if you were just to inflate massively, inflate the currency massively, you could print enough dollars to do anything. Yes, he is right about that. You'll get your collapse though.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Jim, do you have anything to add here?
No, only that I'd like to finish the podcast on a positive note, and I'm just getting angrier and angrier as we move along here, and I'm running out of the energy to scream into the microphone. But the Heartland Institute, we're a some people say conservative think tank, some people say libertarian think tank. We self-identify as a free market think tank, and it's depressing listening to this conversation, to be honest, and how there are, as I mentioned before, there are practically I think it's safe to say, there are no market pressures on our healthcare system at all. Not from the free market. The decisions that we may make as consumers of healthcare, of health services, have no effect on the pricing and the availability and even what is presented to you in a health insurance plan. It's completely broken. It was bad before Obamacare. We needed, and the Heartland Institute's been pushing and had pushed for to get more market forces into the healthcare delivery system and the payment system, because that is the only way to bring down costs and increase the quality of services. The free market works every time for that. And it does. The only thing it was never applied to, since we were, bartering, here, I'll give you a chicken if you take the fever down of my child over here in a barter system. That was probably the last time any kind of real free markets, market economics were applied to the healthcare system. And it is depressing to sit here and think, as we were pushing for it back before Obamacare, that you need free markets to work to bring down prices and increase service, the quality of services. And we went in the completely opposite direction. And now it's to the point where here we are sitting around in a roundtable discussion, doom scrolling ourselves, thinking about how bad it is now. And then how is it ever going to get better? Sam Carnick says the whole thing has to collapse. Well, what the hell does that even look like? What does the healthcare system collapsing look like? That's what it would take to do it, to fix it. I hope it comes fast, because I am sick and tired of my insurance premiums, both for this organization and individually, rising 10, 15, 20% in 1 year. And I'm just supposed to eat that because 6% of Americans needed health insurance? Get the F out of here. It was never about providing health insurance for poor people. It was about, as Chris Talgo said, it was really about either getting a single payer or destroying the system as it is, so that people become more dependent, if not directly on the government for healthcare subsidies, dependent on the government to fix the healthcare system in perpetuity. And that's what that's what every government program is about. It's about control. All right. See, I did have the energy for it, I guess.
Do you want to? So let me calm you down, and by calm you down, I mean make things much worse.
Awesome.
So the sometimes Republicans and conservatives in general can kind of over attribute the ills of society to Obama specifically, but there are 3 areas where he's really, really the worst president we've had on a lot of these things, and that's the healthcare issue. That was, I mean, as we've been talking for the last half an hour, absolutely abysmal. 2, college tuition prices. That is all his fault, with the kind of subsidizing of student loans stuff. And then race relations got worse under Obama. So everything just got worse and less affordable and more chaotic. And it's pretty incredible to look back on it now and think, man, no wonder we have Trump, right? Like, yeah. I mean, look at what we put up with.
I remember when Barack Obama's investment, his $1 trillion investment plan was supposed to cure the economy. And even he, just to show you how, like, I think Barack Obama is a good man. I think he's a smart man, but I think that he just looks down upon hardworking Americans. And what did he say? Oh, I guess those shovel-ready jobs are really all that, like, shovel-ready. And he just laughs it off. Like, but wait a second, sir. You just spent $1 trillion saying that this was going to be the magic elixir for the Great Recession. And it did the total opposite, I mean, and Linnea, I think you failed to mention that Barack Obama, in my opinion, is the grandfather of the green energy transition scam, because his stupid, Reinvestment Act, whatever you want to call it, it included billions of dollars, for these battery A123, which I remember, like, went bankrupt like in a year, and a lot of those, so-called green energy programs we can attribute to good old Barack Obama. And what's happened to the price of electricity since then? Oh, it's skyrocketed. Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I would certainly attribute him slamming on the accelerator and holding it there for that stuff. But I actually blame a little bit the Bush administration for a lot of that as well, and Clinton. So
True.
he doesn't get to claim all of the glory on that disaster.
No, but I do think that he really mainstreamed it. I think that he really, like, put it into, he really made it a big part of the federal government. I mean, I agree with you. I know that even George H.W. Bush, was into the whole climate change, green energy thing. But man, Barack Obama, he really, hit the accelerator on that, and we have not recovered, since. And it's just so nice to have a president in the Oval Office who actually cares about hardworking Americans and paying our bills and our health care and our energy prices, and allowing us to have the freedom to choose what kind of stove we want, what kind of washing machine we want, all that stuff. That, Jim, is your optimistic note of the day.
Yeah. How many light bulbs I have in my basement that I cannot use because I don't know what they are? I have, like, so many concoctions of light bulbs. Like,
every
how
time
do I acquire all these LED, what was the other, fluorescence?
Compact fluorescence.
I mean, you can't get a normal light bulb anymore, and most of them just look ugly, and I shove them in a box.
The light bulb thing was actually just, the light bulb thing was appalling. I'm still mad about that. Well, I'm heated.
When I
know Trump has talked about it. He hates LEDs. He doesn't like the way they look.
When I put 3 or 4, like 5 maybe, articles in my washing machine, it can't handle it. So it's like, what is this? It's like, I feel like the amount of, like, loads I do has increased substantially because of this new washing machine, this green washing machine. It's such a joke.
Right. It turns out to cost more.
Yeah, and not to mention that your HVAC company can't just repair your pre-existing machine anymore. They have to replace it every so often because they keep changing up the, like, fluid or the coolant in it or something in order to maintain standards with EPA. Man, it is all over the place. It's just like everything in our government and everything in our regulatory body exists to do nothing except for make it more expensive to exist.
Well, but when you take the subsidies out, the free market, puts reality back. And I just read a couple days ago that General Motors has announced that they are no longer basically in the EV business, and they have lost $1.6 billion because of those federal $7,500 subsidies that went to the rich that went to the richie riches of this country to go and buy a $80,000 Tesla. So you know what, Jim, maybe there is a shift in this just common sense direction. Maybe.
Stop trying to cheer me up. You're not going to cheer me up.
Okay.
Linnea brought up something really important, which is the effect of regulation. Regulation is a huge tax on the American people. And when I say huge, we're talking literally trillions of dollars per year of suppression of the offering of goods and services to one another. And that is a terrible thing. So one of the things that we have to do, and this is, like, as I said before, it's the complexity issue, that as you create more regulations, then you say, well, we really need to change what coolant we put in air conditioners. And that didn't come from scientists. It came from companies that said, you know what, we could get everybody in the country to have to replace their air conditioners and give the money to us in order to give them new air conditioners. This is all a scam, but it's this complexity benefits a few, but ultimately it just trashes the entire country. And so we're well into that process.
What happens
is it will change.
Yeah, you create a regulation, people figure out a way around it. It may cause an unanticipated consequence. Then we come up with another regulation to undo that, and we create another problem. And it goes on and on and on.
Jim's getting happier.
Yeah, I know.
We're not going to end on a happy
Jim,
note.
I'm worried about you. Are you okay?
Yeah, if we don't end this podcast soon, I might have a stroke. So,
Yeah, well, I just thought, people on the right really enjoy bashing Obama, so I thought that might be a fun way to end the show. But
works for me.
It's very cathartic.
Yeah, it is cathartic. All right. So, you guys, that is all the time we have today, unfortunately. So thank you, everyone, for your attention to these matters. We are live every single week on Thursdays at noon Central on Rumble, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. Anne-Marie, do you have anything that you'd like to point our audience towards today?
No, because I don't want to get Jim upset. Oh, you mean in healthcare news? I'm sorry.
Good things.
No, we're working frantically. I'm afraid to write the subsidy article because things are changing every minute. But yeah, there's a lot going on. So
absolutely.
Healthcare news, you can find it on the heartland.org website.
All right. Chris, how about you?
I have a shout out to Sam Karnick because he wrote an amazing op-ed that I just edited this morning about the housing crisis and how housing is so unaffordable for young people. And Sam, I'm going to get into a great outlet, and that's a really good article. So thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you, Chris.
Sam?
Yeah, thanks. Everybody go to the heartland.org website and to stkarnick.substack.com, where we cover all these issues and more. And you can just sit there all day reading and looking at videos and the like. And you will be highly and greatly edified thereby.
Absolutely. Jim?
Yeah, I want to thank viewer Scott Clay for saying he's praying for me. Don't worry, I'm healthy. I get lots of exercise. I'm in good shape. Doctor gives me the full bill of health when I can afford to go see him, that is. Check us out here tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern time, as we are every Friday for a great show called The Climate Realism Shows. I host it, and Linnea is also on it. So it's going to be a terrific show tomorrow. So we'll see you then.
Absolutely. You guys, to all of our viewers here, if you like your live stream podcast, you can keep your live stream podcast, but only if you hit like right now and recommend our show to your friends. So, thank you guys very much for watching. For audio listeners, please rate us well in whatever service that you're using. Leave a review. Thank you so much to everybody who showed up for the show today. And we will see you guys again next week. Well, I won't, but I'm not going to be here. But the others will see you again next week. All right. Bye, guys.